I'm focusing on sparrows for my newsletter this month. I'm just going to draw a male house sparrow. It's sitting on like a metal strap. So I'm just going to map it out, map the composition out. It's an illustration. It's nicely composed and it's slightly off centre in the photograph, but as it's just an illustration for the booklet that I'm writing, I'm going to I just want it in the middle of the page really. So I'm just mapping the sort of shape of the body, sort of semicircular shape, and where the tail comes out, just to make sure that I've got the right amount of space on the paper. And it's headed as a sort of domed triangle. Got really strong beaks, I find, sparrows, which are quite equal. The top and the bottom are quite equal. There's sometimes a little slight overshoot which creates a little bit of a hook on the end. And the eye is closer to the beak than it is to the back of the head, and just above usually that midpoint of the beak, it just sort of sits above there. I always think that's quite an important thing. The placement of the beak is quite important if you want it to look like the bird that you're drawing. If you get that look wrong, it could look like another species quite easily. There's not a great deal of difference between species often, other than the colouring and the placement of the major structures. They are all birds. So just getting, this is a male house sparrow. Just got its back a little bit too high there, I think. Actually it comes down farther. We have a tendency to sort of straighten things up, so I'm just correcting that I've made it more straight than I should have done. So I'm just trying to correct that a little bit, which means that the tail placement is a bit out as well. And I'm just going to do a few measurements to make sure. I just want to measure the angle of the tail. So I look at that, I just put my arm out straight and I look to see if I was looking at a clock face. So I use my pencil like this, and then I look to see if I was looking at the clock face, where on the clock would my pencil be. And it seems to be, if I measure it on the photograph, it's around about 4 o'clock, something like that. So that's where I want to make sure it is on the image. The angle of the tail is around 4 o'clock. I do teach measured drawing actually, so if it's something that would interest people, I could do a little bit more in-depth version of that. But I do generally prefer to draw intuitively, to have the confidence to just let it be. But because I'm not drawing very much at the moment, I'm very limited on time. My confidence isn't at a point where I feel I can draw intuitively. So I'm tending to need to return to things like measured drawing and proportions and that sort of thing, just to check myself. If I was drawing every day, I'd feel confident enough to trust my eye and hand coordination. But at the moment, I'm not feeling that confident. So I'm just going to check now the length of the bird body as against the head. So I've got the head measurement is that. So how many heads fit into the body? It's probably about 2.5. So I'm going to check that now with my arm straight out on the actual bird on the picture. And actually I think I've got the body a little bit long. So I'm going to just bring that back. Then I'm going to check the length of the tail. And the tail to the body is just not quite as long. I think the tail, because I've now moved the body over a little bit, the tail is now a little bit long too, which is good because it means that my composition is actually more central. So I'm quite happy that that is composed reasonably accurately. The beak here, I've got the beak on the bird. If I look at the central line on the beak on the bird in the photograph is at probably about 10 o'clock. Mine is less than 9 o'clock. So I'm just going to change that because that actually changes the whole sort of stance of the bird because it's looking up slightly and I've got it just looking straight ahead. So I also need to then just drop the eye down a little bit because everything's like changed a little bit now. Keep making sure. It's that thing about straightening everything up as well. We have this tendency to just straighten things up. So now it's looking up a little bit more. I'll work a bit more with that eye, I think, when I come to do the painting. But for now, it's mapped in. I think we've got some sort of structure that I can work with. It's starting to look a little bit like a house sparrow. I've mixed up here some burnt sienna, a little bit of black, a little bit of yellow ochre, just to warm it up a little bit more yellow ochre for this one, which I probably will paint over. I'm just going to start with the brown feathers on the back here. Quite bright, rich brown. Very much the burnt sienna, but just with a slightly yellower tinge, I think, so hence adding the yellow ochre. Going more yellowy actually. As they go into the wing. Just going to add a little bit more yellow to that. I'll come back and drop some more browns in later maybe. The head is quite rich, dark. The light on this bird seems to be coming sort of from this angle, so the front of the bird is more, it tends to be more in shadow. I've just realised that I just have a white colour. I've painted it. I'm just going to try and remove some of that paint there. It's funny how you don't notice things. Just enjoying pushing the paint around, I didn't notice. Over enthusiastic with this brown. Popping it in everywhere where it shouldn't be. Spending some time taking it away now. The shadow area of the chest rest is a warm grey. So I've added a little bit of the burnt sienna in. I'm just trying to keep it nice and textured. To suggest the feathering. And this area here is quite light. For what I'm actually doing, it doesn't really matter whether I recognise the light source or not, because I'm not putting it in an environment anyway, so it's going to be an isolated image surrounded by white. So that won't really make much difference, but it is, as it's there, I might as well take note of it. It adds to the three-dimensional qualities of the bird. Quite like the way it's just bleeding into the grey there. Might go a little bit too far and I might regret this, but I like it at the moment. I'm going to let it persist. It's also going to bleed into the brown. I'm actually going to leave that area for a moment because it's still too wet and it'll just all bleed in together, I think. That area's too wet to do that too. almost the most important part, and the most tricky part is to get the eye in. I think I've painted it a little bit too big, I think, there. Never mind. It's got a little white area around the eye, which I wanted to try and maintain, but haven't really succeeded. I'll try and address that with a pen later, probably, if I think it's necessary. So I'm just bringing the darkest tones in now. I really like the way the colours have bled into each other there. Just from a painterly perspective, I think it's rather a nice effect. Just so lovely and rich, these feathers. I want to get some more of the burnt sienna with them. They're almost pure burnt sienna, these feathers around the head, and then particularly the top ones here, the beautiful, beautiful colour. And then they go paler towards the back here. A little bit more of this warm shadow area into the underside. A little bit more texture. Notice that the beak, the top part of the beak was a bit too narrow, so I've just blended those together, and I'll bring that back in later at a later point with a pencil or with a bit more paint. Okay, just get in there now with that one. There's something wrong with this beak here, so I'm just going to go back in now with my pencil. This is with the oil-based pencil, and just trying to redress the issue that I have with that beak. Just using plain water just to get rid of that mark there. which is not accurate. As much as possible I've got rid of it. Because I'll be using this digitally, I'm kind of cheating a little bit. It wouldn't be, I don't think it would be acceptable if I was going to frame this, because you can still see it a little bit. But because I'm going to be using it digitally, I can clean it up digitally as well. I had a little bit of trouble with that beak from the start though, didn't I? It's all a learning curve, no matter how long I've been doing this. I'm still learning all the time. And because, as I said in my previous ones, I haven't really been doing a lot of drawing and painting, my confidence and my ability to coordinate my hand and my eye isn't as good as I'd like it to be. So I'm tending to make more mistakes or errors of judgment, which is fine. I'm not going to get too worried about it. I haven't got time, I've just got to get on with it. Time constraints are a really good way actually of stopping you from worrying about things. I've often done 30-day challenges and where I'd paint like three paintings like this a day, and then sold the little sketches for charities and things like that. And whilst it's great to raise money for charity, it was also great for my practice and to get me to a point where I felt really confident about drawing and painting. And I did that quite a lot after I finished my masters, because my masters was all about thinking and very slow painting. I made some paintings that took me weeks and weeks to make, and they were a particular sort of work which I've never really made anything similar since. But I did explode out of that MA, just wanting to make just wanting to draw and sketch as quickly as possible. So I did a lot of these little challenges where I painted and drew 3 birds a day, or whatever, 90 birds in 30 days or whatever. And it was a great way to break me out of where I got to with my masters, which I loved. I loved every minute of my masters actually, and I'd love to do it again. But at the same time, it took me to a place that I was quite unfamiliar with. It was quite a hard place to be in because of the subject matter that I was looking at. It was a very challenging subject matter about our treatment of animals, really, about the human-animal relationship, and I found it very challenging. So I just wanted to explode out of that MA and just celebrate all the things around me, just celebrate the birds and the animals around me and just love them as they are, and try not to have too much thought, really. Try to stop having so much thought about it. Just going to pop a little light into its eye to bring it to life. Just going to put a little light around there as well. Not that I really want to highlight his beak because it's not his strength in my painting. There we go. I hope you enjoyed the painting. I'll do more in the future, and hopefully I'm gaining confidence, and my drawings are getting a little bit more fluid. So thank you for being on this journey with me.